our next presentation, and this is Tim Stephen, and he's from here at the University of Albany. He's going to be talking about using technology to open access to academic scholarship, and talking about the case of CIOS, and I'll let Tim explain to you what that means. Oh, can we have a nice round of applause? Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm Tim Stephen, and I'm a professor in the Department of Communication here at the University of Albany. I was invited today to take a few minutes to tell you about our work at the CIOS, which is the Communication Institute for Online Scholarship, in our effort to leverage information technology to enhance the process of scholarship and education within the academic field of human communication and studies, and also to maximize access to science information in our field. The CIOS is a not-for-profit scholarly project that provides a range of electronic services in support of scholarship and education in the social science field that's pretty diverse. Our field covers areas such as media studies, interpersonal interaction, intercultural communication, persuasion, advertising, organizational communication, social networks, public relations, computer-mediated interaction, new communication technologies, television studies, nonverbal communication, rhetoric, and the whole field of journalism. So we're a pretty eclectic and large and diverse field. The CIOS is an online organization providing a set of electronic services that together comprises the oldest, most diversified, and most comprehensive network portal designed to support and enhance an academic discipline. We are a project of communication scholars, a field where interest in new systems of communication has long been part and parcel of what we do. As a not-for-profit project centered in the university world, we've been much invested in leveraging our new network world to improve the quality of education and increase the scope of access to our field's legacy of scholarship. Now, when I refer to our legacy of scholarship, I'm mainly speaking of all the scholarly articles written by generations of faculty in my field. The field has about 150 scholarly journals at this time. Most of these journals put out about 4 issues each year, consisting of about 10 to 15 peer-reviewed articles in each journal issue. Some of our journals have been in continual publication since the early 1920s, so at this time there's a substantial accumulation of articles that comprises the scholarly literature of my field. This corpus is our intellectual legacy, sort of like our crown jewels of the field as a whole, and lowering barriers to access would constitute a good that most likely everybody in the field would strongly endorse. The CIOS project actually began in 1983 when I and Professor Teresa Harrison, who's also now here at the University of Albany, we started the process of exploring means for mounting a kind of academic portal site on the international academic computer networks of that period. The TCP/IP-based networks that we know today as the Internet was not the primary carrier for inter-university connectivity then. Rather, the predominant connection between university centers was accomplished using built-in features of IBM mainframe computers, operating systems, and which were in pervasive use in university computer centers. The first widely used academic computer network was called BitNet, which is an acronym it's basically partly an acronym, standing for either because it's time network or because it's their network. Anyway, BitNet extended throughout many major universities of the Western world, starting, I think, in around 1981, and some research corporation and government sites as well. I worked at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in those days, and I had some computer science literacy and programming skills and was intrigued by the possibility of setting up an online center reachable over BitNet that would allow scholars and students in my field from around the world to share resources and enhance their communication with each other, something that was otherwise prohibitively difficult and expensive in those days. I have to say that at the time it just seemed like a good idea to explore using these emerging technologies to put people in better contact. So I learned what I needed in order to start building the system that became the CIOS. Our thinking then was simply that the new network technologies had terrific potential, so why not see what we can do? Thus, in 1983, we began what has now unfolded continually across nearly 30 years in a project developing and providing new information tools to assist the basic processes of scholarship and education in my field. The portal that we created was originally named ComServe, and it launched in August 1986. That's 8 years before the launch of the World Wide Web. ComServe provided online email-based conferences, quite a few of them, and archives of research instruments and teaching tools, and then expanded in many directions as networking gradually heated up across the academic world. Since in the first years there was no World Wide Web as we know it today, there were no browsers to access the ComSurf portal. Instead, people used commands sent in email or text messages that were sent over the BitNet network in the same way that we send text messages today over our cellular networks. In those days of mainframe computers, there was a more or less universal set of technologies available in most places, so we were able to create an interactive client interface to ComSurf services that users could freely download and run from their campus IBM or DEC systems at universities around the world. The client program, which was named EasyCom, provided a menued interface, and because we were trying to make a truly inclusive system that could make the world of communication scholars and students a little smaller and friendlier, we created alternative language sets in Spanish, Portuguese, and French, so that ComSurf could respond to users in those languages as an alternative to the default English interface. In 1990, the CIOS became the creator of the first electronic academic journal ever published in the social sciences, and one of the first 5 to be created in world history. We did this because we thought that electronically produced and distributed journals could speed production and distribution of scholarly articles, and in so doing reduce costs of access to the scholarly literature of our field. The journal that we created was named the Electronic Journal of Communication, and it's now in its 22nd volume with all content open access except for the most recently published volume. We may have been the first to create software for electronically distributing academic journals with hyperlinked content. Since neither the web, PDF, or HTML were there yet, to do this we invented a markup language not so different from basic HTML today, but with links only to other places within the document being displayed rather than to other websites. Well, there weren't any other websites. So on the other hand, we included other enhancements helpful for consuming academic journals, such as options to highlight text that you were reading and save the highlights, and to store marginal notations as you read. Each journal issue was published as an executable program that ran, sort of, so to speak, on a desktop running the DOS operating system. All this activity required an extensive investment of time in organizing and responding to a growing community of other communication scholars who were investing in aspects of CIOS projects in ways such as publishing articles in its journal and becoming journal issue editors, serving as conference moderators in the email-based conferences, contributing pedagogical materials and research tools to the archives. So with a growing number of people investing so much, we felt it would be a good idea to formalize the project as a not-for-profit organization in order to protect its future. And at this point, the CIOS was officially inaugurated as a 501c3 organization. I think the year was 1991. With the benefit of hindsight, I would say that we were about 10 years early with the project. If we'd waited a few years, we wouldn't have had to custom make so much of the technologies a project like this needs, and to do it basically without hardly any funding at all. Although the project generated a lot of excitement among a group of IT-enabled people in my field in the 1980s, the amount of work going into developing and operating the components of the project and responding to our user community's needs was disproportionately large compared to the amount of use ComSurf received in its first days. But it was hard to put the project down, though, because many people did see it as an innovation and were excited about its potential to be helpful for the field, and really, so were we. As we moved into the early 1990s and the dawn of the World Wide Web, there was a fast and massive uptick in the relevance of the services we'd already established and considerable interest in growth and adoption. In fact, the project received much early attention and promotion from the library community once it appeared on their radar screens, which actually didn't take very long. In the early days of the internet, the library community was more aware of where the world was heading than most and saw our project as a possible concrete example of what might lie ahead, at least in the university world. As of the early 1990s, we began to benefit from good connection with the library community, which has provided a great deal of help, guidance, and beneficial attention to our project over the years. I guess if you say that it takes a village, our friends in the library world and the IT world, and especially computer science students, have been our wonderfully helpful neighbors. The early 90s were a demanding time, not only because the advent of the web was bringing a crush of activity to the project, but then too, universities were shifting from the mainframe model and centralized computers to personal computer model. And it was clear that we couldn't count on continuing to operate on the campus mainframes, which we originally operated on for much longer, or to take advantage of all the other computing resources that are part of the typical campus centralized IT environment, such as email servers and listserv conferences and backup systems, mass storage, and around-the-clock operation and maintenance. So at that time, everything that had been written and worked out for the mainframes had to be rewritten and often completely reconceived so that we could seamlessly provide the same services but now running on a dinky personal computer in my office. We had to create email systems and listserv software from scratch, and we needed to supply for ourselves all the processes and services that the University Computer Center had provided. From the early to late 1990s, the technological landscape was undergoing such rapid and seismic level shifts that it was an exhilarating time. A great time for pioneering and full of rich opportunities for creativity. But keeping up with the shifting technological requirements in such a rapidly changing environment was very demanding, if not exhausting. To cope with it all and to keep innovating, we eventually needed some degree of financial support. So in the early 90s, we authored a standalone software system, a database named ComIndex that comprised the first electronic bibliographic index to the literature of the communication field. At first, we distributed it on a set of 5 1/4 inch floppy disks, the type that really were floppy. We sold this database to scholars and university libraries for tiny amounts of money in order to earn the funds we needed to buy computer equipment and software project that our project required. We also did a fair amount of begging for software and hardware donations. About 6 years into the ComIndex project, librarians who really did like it told us we should add abstracts and some other features to ComIndex, and by the late 1990s we launched a new database named ComAbstracts as a web-only database. ComAbstracts was very well received by university libraries, providing a service for the communication field that nobody had ever offered before and helping to underwrite our operations. With the proliferation and increasing sophistication of the Java programming language in the year 2000, we launched the Visual Communication Concept Explorer, which is a web browser-based applet that can relate core concepts in the field to each other in a way that becomes an interface to all the various databases that we provide. So it runs in your local browser and it interacts with server processes on our systems remotely. Gathers key concepts and then shows you how they relate to each other. It uses the Swing package to provide this kind of interface, and all these things are fully clickable and end up with being able to cruise through the network of interrelated concepts from the communication literature and then jump to database searches in particular databases that you might target. The interface is particularly useful for people who wanted to search in our literature who are not experienced in the field and may have no idea of what goes with what, which is really part of the local knowledge of being educated in the discipline. In addition to ComIndex and ComAbstracts, the CIOS has become the publisher of a range of open access materials, including detailed free access treatments of core subjects, areas of communication field authored by some of our field's leading scholars. To encourage this, the CIOS provided small grants and technical help to faculty from around the country to support the creation of content. We call this project the Electronic Encyclopedia of Communication. As well, our open text project converts to electronic form and makes freely available out-of-print scholarly books in communication. As we move through the past decade, we continue to explore new ways to leverage our project in the service of the field. In 2006, we created a new database named ComVista. The data for ComVista is continually harvested and refreshed from about 800 communication department websites and allows users to locate faculty members at any U.S. or Canadian university, defined by state undergraduate programs or graduate programs, and their contact information. ComVista also goes a step further and tallies faculty publication by department, and since all the publications we track in ComAbstracts, which is arguably a census of the field's entire history of publication, we code them all with a closed vocabulary of relevant classificatory metadata that we developed. So ComIndex profile department research and allows users to locate those departments that are leaders in the communication field in various areas of scholarship for which we code. And then year before last, we launched ComAnalytics, which is a database that takes ComVista even a step further and tracks faculty and department productivity for every communication department in the U.S. and Canada, providing normative data for the entire field historically and now by institution and program type.